History remembers the kings, the generals, and the massive armies. But what if one of the most incredible heroes in history was a teenage girl whose name was almost completely forgotten? This is the true story of Aurelia, a girl whose courage and quick thinking stopped a powerful invasion, saved her entire kingdom, and changed the course of history, all without a single soldier by her side. Hundreds of years ago, nestled in the mountains, was a small kingdom called Valoria. Life there was peaceful. Families raised goats on the hillsides, farmers tended to their terraced fields, and traders passed through on safe roads. But Valoria had a dangerous neighbor, a massive empire that wanted its land, its resources, and its strategic mountain passes. One winter, the kingdom's scouts returned with terrifying news. An invading army was on its way, an army 20 times larger than anything Valoria could possibly defend against. The king panicked. The soldiers prepared for a hopeless battle, and the people braced for the worst. In a small village near the kingdom's border lived Aurelia, a 16-year-old girl known for being unusually clever and curious. While other kids played, she spent her time studying maps, solving complex puzzles, and exploring every corner of the surrounding mountains. She noticed things that everyone else overlooked: hidden trails, unstable rock formations, and the strange way echoes bounced off certain cliffs. Her father was a royal scout, and sometimes, even though girls weren't supposed to, she'd listen in on military discussions. One evening, she overheard soldiers talking about the enemy's plan. They were going to march through Raven Pass, a narrow canyon that acted as a direct route to Valoria's capital city. Hearing this, a chill went down Aurelia's spine. She knew that pass better than anyone. She had explored it countless times and knew its cliffs were dangerously unstable. And in that moment, a daring idea sparked in her mind, an idea that could use the pass itself as a weapon. Aurelia immediately ran to the local guards, trying to explain her plan. "Don't fight them in the open," she urged. "Block the pass. We can bring down the cliffs and trap the invaders before they even reach the capital." But nobody listened. To them, she was just a young girl with no rank, no training, and absolutely no authority. They dismissed her immediately. But Aurelia refused to give up. She knew she was right. That night, she gathered a small group of her friends, other teenagers, who knew her well and trusted her judgment. Under the cover of darkness, she led them high up the treacherous mountain trails above Raven Pass. She pointed out the specific cracks in the rock, the loose boulders she'd identified, and the narrow ledges that only she knew how to safely navigate. Working in absolute silence, they used simple ropes, levers, and tools to prepare her trap. What they were doing was incredibly dangerous and technically illegal, but Aurelia was convinced it was the only hope to save their homes and families. At sunset, the very next day, the horizon darkened with the sight of the invading army. Thousands of soldiers marched confidently into Raven Pass, believing that Valoria's tiny army stood no chance against their might. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that Aurelia and her small team were hidden high in the cliffs directly above them, waiting. They held their breath, silent, still, and utterly terrified as they watched the enemy fill the narrow canyon below. It was the perfect kill zone. Aurelia watched as the last of the invaders entered the trap. Taking a deep breath, she whispered the signal, "Now." Her friends pulled on the ropes, dislodging the massive key boulders she had marked the night before. The cliffs began to shake. A sound like thunder ripped through the canyon. A massive chain reaction started as rocks slammed into other rocks, collapsing entire sections of the canyon walls. In a matter of seconds, an avalanche of stone and earth crashed down, sealing the pass. The invaders were trapped. Panic and chaos erupted within the invading army. They couldn't move forward. They couldn't retreat. Their supply wagons were crushed, their horses bolted in terror, and their disciplined formation completely disintegrated. On the other side of the pass, Valoria's small army, which had been preparing for a final, desperate stand, watched in absolute disbelief. The impossible had just happened. The greatest army in the region had been defeated by soldiers. It had been stopped by a teenage girl. When word of the miraculous event reached the king, he couldn't believe it. He immediately ordered a full investigation, and every witness, from the soldiers to the villagers, pointed to one person: Aurelia and her team of teenagers. Aurelia was summoned to stand before the king. She expected to be punished for acting without orders, but instead, he offered her a magnificent reward: land, immense wealth, and a permanent seat on the royal council. But Aurelia, standing before the most powerful man in the kingdom, politely refused. She said, "I only did what anyone should do when danger threatens their home." The king was so impressed by her humility and brilliance that he insisted on honoring her. Eventually, she agreed to one thing: to train Valoria's scouts and teach her unique strategies. For many years, she did just that, and her knowledge of the land and unconventional tactics shaped Valoria's defense for generations to come. So, if she was such a hero, why have most of us never heard of her? After Aurelia passed away, her incredible story was preserved in local songs and told from one generation to the next. But as years turned into centuries and official records were written and rewritten, her name began to fade. Historians later found documents describing the event, mentioning a young strategist who single-handedly saved Valoria from invasion. But because the records never mentioned gender, everyone simply assumed this brilliant mind belonged to a young male soldier. It wasn't until very recently that researchers, piecing together local folklore and overlooked texts, finally discovered the truth. The forgotten hero was Aurelia of Raven Pass, a teenage girl. Her story reminds us that heroes don't always wear crowns or command armies. Sometimes the course of history is changed by one brave young person who sees the world differently and chooses to act when everyone else stands frozen in fear. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more hidden histories.